Welcome to the Dan Sports Tips NFL Daily Fantasy Preview Show for Week 11 of the NFL season. I will be taking a look at everything you need for your daily fantasy games on DraftKings. I'll be looking at offensive stacks, defensive stacks, and players that we can use at other positions. For anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to sign up and play daily fantasy sports with DraftKings yet, I will put a link in the description for this video that will enable you to do that today. I'm going to dive straight into the show with our offensive stacks. I'll start with the Carolina Panthers, quarterback Cam Newton for 6,800 and wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin for the same price of 6,800. We all know when playing the Chiefs, you want to avoid the ball hawk corner, Marcus Peters, when you're facing off against them. However, much like the Seattle Seahawks, the Kansas City Chiefs do not tend to move their corners around, keeping each of them to their own side. This is good news for Kelvin Benjamin. He should get plenty of routes away from Peters in this game and an opportunity to make some big plays against cornerbacks of smaller stature than him and inferior ability. Cam Newton's price has steadily dropped all season. And in this matchup against the Kansas City defense that's seriously banged up and could be without as many key pieces as Derek Johnson, Justin Houston and Tamba Hali, Newton should have plenty of time to operate, as that will negate the Kansas City pass rush, leading an offense that's exceeded 30 points scored in 4 of the 7 games he's played in this year. Benjamin and Olsen are the target monsters historically for this offense. However, throughout the passage of time, we note that the Chiefs have covered the tight end well. As such, I prefer to stack Benjamin with Cam Newton in this instance. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, quarterback Jameis Winston for 6,300 and Mike Evans, the wide receiver, for 9,000. There simply is not a cornerback on the Bears that can cover Mike Evans, who, as predicted, has seen his production spike massively after the injury to Vincent Jackson. Both teams have got only reasonable rushing defense and inadequate pass defense, and as such, this game could develop into a track meet with some decent receiving options on both rosters. Jameis Winston should see some additional time to throw with the return, or the expected return, of lead running back Doug Martin in this game, and that hopefully will provide an uptick to his numbers from recent weeks. I've included him as a stack for a number of reasons. I'm not sure that ownership's going to be that high on Jameis this week, which obviously gives us upside in tournaments, and also I think the total in Vegas, so to speak, is low. It's set in the mid-40s. I think this game's going to go way over that, and as such, it's a game that's under the radar, got a lot of points in it, in my opinion, and that's obviously what we're looking for in daily fantasy. The Atlanta Falcons, quarterback Matt Ryan for 7,300 and wide receiver Julio Jones for 9,500 is a super expensive stack, and the Falcons on the road are not always a proposition you like to take, but after solid performances in Denver and Seattle, I think we can trust them a little bit more this year. They are the leading offense in the NFL per Football Outsiders DVOA. It's somewhat irresistible force against immovable object in this match because the Eagles are the top passing defense as well. However, in my mind, the Eagles don't pass the eye test. Anyone who saw Odell Beckham running free down the field multiple times against Leodis McKelvin, the apparent number 1 corner on this team last week, can only agree with that statement. McKelvin is also banged up this week. He's looked simply terrible in coverage, as has the rest of the Eagles' back end, really. Julio Jones is better than Odell Beckham. Matt Ryan is better than Eli Manning. The Falcons have scored 30 points in all bar 2 games this year, and I'm not convinced that ownership is going to be huge for this stack, partly due to the price of Julio and partly due to the matchup. The Tennessee Titans, this is our bargain basement stack of the week. Quarterback Marcus Mariota for 5,700 and wide receiver Rashard Matthews for 4,200. As I say, it is a bit of a lottery ticket. Mariota and Matthews facing Green Bay and their not so good secondary. It's incredibly hard to run the ball on the Packers. DeMarco Murray and Derek Henry have both missed practices this week, so there are also health concerns for them for this matchup for the Titans. The Titans will have to get away from their run game if they want success in this game, because Green Bay do stop the run well. That's the question, whether or not the coaching staff are willing to do that. Tennessee themselves also do struggle to defend the pass, and as Green Bay can't run the football, this does look to be a pass-heavy game with potentially a decent amount of points, certainly higher than the projected total. Mariota and company have quietly combined for 26 points in each of their last 4 games. Rashard Matthews has got 5 touchdowns in 5 games. He's seen more consistent targets over that time frame, culminating in a season high of 10 last week, and that's obviously what we're looking for in our receivers, is targets, targets. The final offensive stack this week is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Quarterback Ben Roethlisberger for 6,800. Wide receiver Antonio Brown for 8,900. You have to love a stack that is probably going to be majorly under-owned after the terrible performance of last week. Roethlisberger was clearly not healthy for that game. He has a poor record in games where his first game back from injury. Potentially he returns too quickly in the first instance. They get the Dallas Cowboys, who are banged up in the secondary. I think at home they could bounce back with a huge performance this week, much like they did earlier this year following the 34-3 loss in Philly. They rebounded by destroying a good Chiefs team and hanging 43 points on them. Antonio Brown is the best receiver in football and the favourite target of Ben Roethlisberger. He should be taken to capitalise here on a Cowboys defence that ranks 17th to this point in DVOA, defending the pass. And that's without any injuries as well. I think the Steelers are under the radar, and with the short memory of a lot of daily fantasy players, only really looking back to what happened last week, they do provide us with a spot to maybe get some upside. Looking at our defensive stacks for today, the Arizona Cardinals, running back David Johnson, $8,400, and the Cardinals defense and special teams for $3,700. This is as premium gets in defensive stacks. Certainly the running back portion of this stack should be 101% owned in all games, in all honesty. David Johnson is the centrepiece of the Cardinals offence. He's one of the best backs in football. He's in play on all downs, getting the receiving work as well, averaging over 25 DraftKings points per game, and he meets the worst run defence in football in the 49ers and looks almost certain to have a big day. I feel I should probably address this. I mean, this isn't any advice that you're not going to see on any daily fantasy show or article this week. David Johnson is the premier play. But sometimes you're better off going with the masses. I think what David Johnson has the potential to do, and the chance of him doing that this week, is far greater than David Johnson having a bad day or David Johnson getting an injury. And I think the advantage that you are going to give your opponents if you fade David Johnson and he does what is a high percentage expected points total this week, you're giving them such an advantage that I don't know where or how you're going to make that points difference up elsewhere. Sometimes chalk is the right way. As I say, I just don't see any way you can fade him this week. The Cardinals' defence themselves, they're excellent against the pass with a strong secondary. Front seven's registered a fairly average number of 21 sacks this year. Should have its opportunities to get against a below-average 49ers team that potentially could still be down main starting running back Carlos Hyde this week. And you just wonder where the points are going to come from for the San Francisco 49ers. Looking at our quarterbacks this week, this again is another one that's almost fairly obvious. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers for $7,600. It isn't rocket science, but the Packers running backs are all injured, leaving Rodgers, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the game, to throw the ball around. While his weapons are not what they once were, Rodgers' production is still very usable. He's scored over 27 points in 3 consecutive games since the running backs' problems came to the fore. He spreads the ball around, meaning there is no one true stack to go with him. The Titans' defence against the pass ranks 27th in DVOA, and although he's far from cheap, Rodgers does look a legit play this week in both cash and tournament play. Looking at our running backs this week, Jay Ajayi of the Miami Dolphins for $7,000. Not a lot much needs to be said about Ajayi. He has over 500 rushing yards in 3 games, including breaking the 100-yard barrier last week, averaging over 4 yards per carry against an excellent New York Jets run defence. He draws a much easier assignment this week with the San Diego Chargers, who rank 19th against the run by Football Outsiders DVOA, and his recent excellent run looks likely to continue, as it appears the Dolphins have come to the decision that their route to success is through Ajayi rather than the inconsistent arm of Ryan Tannehill under centre. Running back Chris Ivory of the Jacksonville Jaguars for $3,400. He busts through the 100-yard barrier for the first time this year against an average Chiefs run defence after the change of coordinator in Jacksonville. They have stated their desire to bring much more balance into this offence. The beneficiaries of that are going to be Yeldon and Ivory. Assuming Chris Ivory can hold on to the football this week, not put it on the ground, then in a soft matchup against Houston, in what is a winnable game for the Jags against these Texans, he has the opportunity to prove he is back after an injury-plagued start to the year. He is certainly worthy of inclusion in some lineups. Running back Capri Bibbs of the Denver Broncos for $4,000. He's my lottery ticket play at running back this week. The matchup against the Saints has proven over the season to be capable of sustaining two running backs. Bibbs broke off a huge run after the catch on a screen for a touchdown against Oakland last week. Devontae Booker, the other running back in play here, has been underwhelming since taking over for CJ Anderson, averaging less than 2.5 yards per carry, including against that poor Oakland unit last week. Booker is carrying a shoulder injury as well. While it's never wise to listen too hard to what coaches say, Kubiak has said that Bibbs has earned a larger role in the offense. I definitely think he'll get the passing down work. And the Saints rank dead last in the league for defensive efficiency on passes to running backs. Bibbs will have a very low floor this week, but he's definitely an intriguing tournament lottery ticket this week. And I'm going to stick with Mark Ingram, just like last week, of the New Orleans Saints for $5,400. Ingram paid off for us last week due to a couple of touchdowns, including the 75-yard scamper, though I will admit to being worried early doors when he didn't see the field on the Saints' opening drive. For all the excellence in the Denver pass defense, they cannot stop the run. They were exposed mightily in prime time against the Raiders last week. The Saints would do well to use Ingram and Hightower extensively this week in the Dome. I prefer Ingram. I think he's got more upside than Hightower. Denver have had multiple games this year where they've allowed usable numbers to multiple running backs, so plug Ingram in, and while last week is unlikely to repeat, I do suspect he'll have another solid day and probably have low ownership again. Looking at wide receivers this week, Kenny Britt, I'm going to put him up again of the Los Angeles Rams for $4,900. As when we used him last week, we aren't comfortable with Case Keenum delivering the football. However, this week's matchup is basically the best on the slate against the 30th ranked pass defense in DVOA in the New York Jets. When Britt faced the Lions, who ranked directly below the Jets, he delivered 35 DraftKings points with 136 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has been fairly consistent, scoring 12 points or more in 5 of 8 games this year. The one outlier being the Jets game, being the Lions game, sorry. The Rams are not a high-powered offense, but in a game where they're unlikely to run well against the stout Jets unit, the ball will be in Keenum's hands, and Britt is easily the most consistent of these Rams receiving options. Demarius Thomas, a wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, at $6,700. The Broncos visit the generous Saints this week. Thomas has proven to be the bigger red zone threat of the Broncos receivers. And also, the Saints don't defend the screen pass well, and they do like to throw that wide receiver screen to Demarius Thomas. Most games in the Dome in New Orleans do end up in as shootouts. I think the Saints will generate enough points on the ground to require Denver to throw the ball around. Both Sanders and Thomas are in play, but I like the touchdown upside for Thomas a little bit more, and he has more consistent targets with double-digit looks in 4 consecutive games. In the same period, Emmanuel Sanders has just 2 such games. Wide receiver Doug Baldwin of the Seattle Seahawks for $5,800. Seattle have been throwing the ball more this year, in large parts due to their struggles running the ball. The Patriots' pass defense is weaker than their run unit, and Baldwin, along with tight end Jimmy Graham, is the best pass catcher that the Seahawks have. He's consistently targeted, and in a game where the Seahawks are likely to have some points up, to put some points up to keep pace with the Patriots, I think Baldwin has a high ceiling this week. Wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey of the Chicago Bears for $6,600. Cutler Jeffrey is something that the Bears can expect to see plenty of now that 6 is back under centre for the Bears. Cutler does have a history of looking for one favourite target in the passing game. Used to be Brandon Marshall, who got that volume. Now Jeffrey receives the number 1 target privileges. The Bucs defence ranks 20th in DVOA against the pass, and the more that Jeffrey is matched up on rookie Vernon Hargreaves, the better it will be for Chicago. I'm certain Cutler will look at that matchup early and often, giving Jeffrey solid upside and hopefully low ownership, as after all, the Bears have won just the 2 games this season. Looking at Dontrell Inman of the San Diego Chargers for $3,400, with the injury to Travis Benjamin severely limiting him last week, and Tyrell Williams also being banged up. Inman has seen a steadily increasing workload in the Chargers offense. In receipt of 9 targets last week, Inman could have some upside in a game that looks likely to be competitive against the Dolphins this weekend, and considering the $2,000 price difference between Williams and Ingram, I think he offers substantially better value this week. Looking at tight ends, Jimmy Graham of Seattle for $5,300. The Patriots rank in the bottom third of the league defending the tight ends. They are susceptible in coverage over the middle, so tight ends and slot receivers for the Seahawks are in play. The Hawks do appear to have finally figured out how to get Graham involved. He's at least 8 targets in 5 of 6 games. He will be heavily utilised in this game, as you imagine that Seattle are going to have to throw the ball and score some points. He eclipsed 100 yards for the 3rd time this season and made 2 outstanding one-handed touchdown grabs last weekend. This may lead to a spike in ownership as a negative, but he does look a rock-solid play this week. And the other tight end is very much a lottery ticket play, Dominique Jones of the Miami Dolphins for 2,500. It's got a proper sort of zero floor, but upside against a team in San Diego that has struggled to defend the tight end for years. Jones scored a touchdown last week on his season-high 4 targets. I will almost guarantee 0.1% ownership, but he does come with that sort of risk as well. This is one that, call it a gut-feeling play, so to speak. Looking at defences this week, I think the Washington Redskins for $3,000. Minnesota simply cannot score points. 16 points is their high watermark in the last 3 games. With injuries on their offensive line, we have opportunities to rack up the sacks with a very good Washington pass rush against a less than mobile Sam Bradford as well. The Skins unit's underrated, and while they struggle to stop the run, without Peterson, the Vikes don't move the ball on the ground, and I think there's a lot to like about the Washington Redskins defense this week. That's what I've got for you this week. Best of luck with your lineups. Do please like the video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter at dansports.tips. Let me know in the comments the plays you'll be making this week, and don't forget to tweet me any pictures of lineups you use using these players that help you win any money this week. I'm here every week through the season. I'll see you next week.